Okay. Well, hello everybody. Sorry, I'm fumbling around here, but again, this is why I need GAs.
We are good to go.
So I my work is in developing countries, and my current work is in Peru and Ecuador, and I work with two separate communities in Ecuador. But the whole idea was they've come to me to ask me for economic sustainability, but also how do they do that and retain their culture. So this is how I do it. So here I am. I'm at Oklahoma State University. I have the Institute for Global Social Entrepreneurship. I'm also the International Entrepreneurship Chair, and this is how I when I ran into Sven, this is exactly how it happened on LinkedIn. That's how it worked. Okay, Sven, do you do it or do I do it?
I do it.
Okay. So first, I talk about ecosystems the way you all think about ecosystems, where plants and animals and everything work together in an environment. But the whole idea is to keep a balance. In business, I see ecosystem, the term thrown around a lot. But what they're really talking about there are data networks, not about ecosystem the way I think about it. I use it in a biological way. The idea is that within this ecosystem, there are businesses and people and practices that make an ecosystem work where everyone is working with each other. It's the idea, because I work in social entrepreneurship. I'm really focused on a social mission, not on profit. So it's important that we do this. So if you think on ecosystem the way I have the way you see it here, here is a very simple image of an ecosystem. But these organisms and plants and animals, these are, imagine that they are businesses within a business community. So we look at things like community assets, markets, political elements, all to make this ecosystem sustainable and thrive. And because I work in developing areas, this is exactly the issue that they're working with. How do they move ahead but still retain their identity? Okay. And so in doing all this and setting up this ecosystem, one thing that I have to stress is that I'm not trying to turn these developing communities in different countries capitalist, because when you talk entrepreneurship, you really are talking about sort of the whole idea behind capitalism, that you can grow and become something you weren't. You can get rich, and many times this is all people think about. But when I talk about social ecosystems, I'm looking more at the idea of community thriving, doing well, and many times it's about adoption versus retail sales. So there is no real market value for some of the things I'm doing here. So the idea with the ecosystem is to look at how this is working. Okay. So here are some of the key components. But the idea is that, so here is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. When I was speaking social missions, to go back to that ecosystem and start to consider where we are today in the world. So a lot of the people I work with started out with US funds and aid that way. Since that's gone away for the moment, I'm stressing that they look at these components and think about who is in their ecosystem and how they can work to perhaps barter, trade, give to others in that ecosystem. So it's more about the sharing of resources rather than using the resources to move ahead to make a profit. So I do this a lot, and it's actually saving what the communities I'm working in. Okay, so the project is to establish this ecosystem. I stress with them that I'm not talking about a geographic area. I'm talking about everything and everyone that contributes to their economic sustainability. So to do this, I collected data to establish the ecosystem from them as they see it. So they provide me with the data, the locations, who that ecosystem includes, including themselves. Then what I've done is I weight the elements in that ecosystem for a total score. I go back to the community. I work with community groups to establish what is their ideal ecosystem. So there is one image. What is missing? That's the second image. And then their businesses, their mission is to fill in those gaps in that ecosystem. So a lot of times it's not just businesses, it's also people, it's merchants, it's logistics, it's all of those things. How do you fill that in? Because they have to decide what they can do with what they have themselves. That's called effectuation. Or they have to ask themselves, who else can they invite into the ecosystem? The whole idea around the ecosystem is that it is self-sufficient, that it replenishes itself. What they're used to in many of the places I work with is that they may produce products and services and revenue, but that's often directed outside of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem never gets a chance to rebuild and to strengthen itself. So I ask the community to come together and let's talk about what's ideal, what's not there, and then think about how you can do something to fill in those gaps. I use a design professor from our design department to build holograms so that the community can see the ecosystem. And sometimes it's hard for them to visualize it because they only think in geographic terms. To see the ecosystem in this broader sense, because if some of them are trading with the US or Europe or with Africa, that becomes part of their ecosystem. So it becomes important that they understand this and see this, and then they begin to get it. Once they see what's there, what's not there, they can start to establish the entrepreneurial projects. For me, to help them, I look at the total score of all the elements, and then what the score is with what they have, and how do we restore that to a score. So I can do it that way, and also do it with them seeing what happens. And then once we decide what has to be done, then I talk to them about, okay, so who can you propose to? And I teach them the other part of entrepreneurship, the business part, how to prepare proposals, how to negotiate, how to write a contract, what kind of contract. Everyone always thinks in terms of grants, but grants isn't always the way to go. So again, the idea is business sustainability on top of their growing and establishing and keeping their culture. So this is what I do, and it so far I have some projects. I've worked everywhere. I've worked in Peru, of course. I've worked in Central America, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Africa. Pakistan is one of my old project I'm renewing. Pakistan, India, even Afghanistan. Although it's difficult to work there. But here's the research how I do it in Peru. In Peru, I work with indigenous populations. The first project was indigenous fishermen, and they were using primitive methods, whole lines being handheld lines. They were on these rafts made of poles. They fish, and they were only to catch mahi and giant squid. They can only catch one fish at a time on these rafts. I'll show you one in a moment. And they would catch their catch, go back to shore, hand off their catch, and go back out. But what's happening is that these huge fishing trawlers are now entering their water space. This is in northern Peru. So while they are using single lines, the trawlers are throwing out these nets and pulling in all these fish. So the question is, how can they compete with this? They need they need this not only for money, but also as a food source, protein source for their villages. Many of them live in the Andes that surround Peru. So I help them. I work with them to establish what their ecosystem was. It's not just the fishermen, the buyers, the packers of the fish community, the indigenous people in Peru, and they also wanted to get rid of their European and Chinese middlemen and work directly with indigenous populations in the U.S. So now that's part of their ecosystem. And I have here, well, you see the asterisk. This is what they ideally wanted and what wasn't there. So we decided, we identified who had to be included in their ecosystem. So now the ecosystem we had an administrative umbrella. All the fishermen were working by themselves. To think about this in terms of business, we had to build an administrative umbrella that oversaw what any business sees. operations, finance, legal, logistics. So with that cooperative now with this administrative umbrella does the selling, does the negotiations, and they all bring their fish to one place, and that's where they get the biggest impact. What you're seeing here is, this is what the fishermen go out into the water on these poles, and that's what they do. And then with that, they also have use hand tools. You have the next. Is there another picture, Sven? Oh no, there wasn't. One of the pictures I wanted to show you was the children in the villages. I went to visit the villages in the Andes, and went to one of the schools. The children, ages 4, 5, they're all in school. They all have these big rosy cheeks, and I don't have a picture of that. These big rosy cheeks, and I thought it was because of the height and they were outside in the mountains. No, the rosy cheeks are a sign of protein deficiency. So this is why they have to send some of their catch back to their villages. So we set this cooperative up, and so far as working to date, we'll do more of it with agriculture, with plants, with other fish, but all the while I'm realizing that this is what they do. This is part of their culture, their heritage, to also help them with new ways to do what they do. So it's not a matter of doing away with their indigenous ways, their indigenous cultures, but a way to enhance that. I also work in Ecuador, in Guayaquil. I work in Guayaquil and in Cuenca, 2 different places. When I work in Guayaquil, I work with an Afro-Ecuadorian community. They're descendants of escaped slaves of a slave ship, and then that slave ship the slaves went to Ecuador. So in Guayaquil, here's an Afro-Ecuadorian community that is in distress. Crime, drugs run rampant, poverty. They're discriminated against because they look like Africans, not like Ecuadorians. So there's always this discrimination, and with that comes the oppression that comes with racial tension. So I was asked by this one community to work with them, where they could move ahead economically, but in doing that, not doing away with their culture. So I work with them by doing the same thing I did in Peru, helping them set up a administrative overhead umbrella where they can work on how they pull together their skills, their crafts to move beyond Guayaquil, beyond Ecuador even. And that they also are realizing that their African heritage plays a big part in what they do and how they do it. So I encourage them to grow their ecosystem to include their African heritage partners in the US, in Africa, in European. That's also part of their market. And to think about how they use that. One of the things that's missing in their ecosystem is education. I'm working with a community that doesn't have a lot of education. The kids always don't go to school. So we are working to provide that. So we're part of the ecosystem, and we have a English for entrepreneurship for kids that we teach. My students we meet with them on Zoom. Here's our last session with them, part of the group. And we're doing that in Guayaquil. We do that in Peru, Cuenca, and we've just started doing this whole thing in Pakistan. We'll be doing it in India, Mexico, New Mexico. The idea is to include education in their ecosystem and fill that out, because that's a big part of how they move forward. So I do a lot of this with AI. So when I work, and this is where I work with Sven. So Sven helps me an awful lot to put this thing in some sort of sense. So with next one, Sven.
Yeah, maybe just maybe there's 30 seconds. I guess we would need to go to the other session afterwards, but maybe 30 seconds.
Okay. Well,
quickly.
I'll leave this here for you to see, but we use AI as part of a discovery tool to create the maps, to collect the data, and using that for what we're doing. And AI is helping us help greatly, and that's that. So that's what I do.
And that's super interesting. And I want just to be quickly the connection actually between the things that you do research on and the things that you also taught us, right? And giving us the idea. At first sight, it seems like it is something else that you focus on, right? But then we talked and realized there is a framework behind it, how to build up functional ecosystems. And LoftOS now, we have experience with building up, I just got this number this morning, 1,700 platforms and ecosystems that are running on LoftOS. We have taken also from your studies a kind of framework, what it needs to have to build up successful systems. And we put this together into these slides here. I know that a lot of you already talked with your customer success managers about exactly these slides. If not, this will come. If we forget it, please ask us for it, because that's actually the new way of how we want to also guide you to build up these ecosystem thinking. Who are the user groups, the user types within your ecosystem? What are they bringing to the ecosystem? What are they needing from the ecosystem? And then actually really define the user outcomes and define the user actions. And this is the same thing that Greg just explained in an offline world. We also need the same thing in the digital world. So there's a pattern that we found, and we also bring this pattern to a white paper that I'm currently preparing. Craig needs to check it afterwards, but then we will also share it with you. But the content behind this is in these slides here that are already using. So yeah, happy to share this with you afterwards. And please make sure that if you don't have this pattern for your ecosystem, for your community already, make sure that you get one of us to go with you through this.
I just want to point out one fast thing. That is, we are trying to bring, my degree is not in business. My degree is in social science. And in social science, I did visual anthropology. I used visual sociology. The idea is that we start to do this for the ecosystems. So I'm asking the people I'm working with to start providing me with photographs of their ecosystem, photographs of themselves, the products, that we can include that in our hologram.
Perfect. Greg, thank you a lot for joining us. Super nice that you made it also this early in Oklahoma. Super nice insights, and also super nice to see how you can broaden our views. Not everything is digital, and that's super perfect.
Well, thank you all very much. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Perfect.